Tony Montana had the world for the taking, and take was exactly what he did: money, power, women. But in the end, he failed to take what he needed most: his eyes off the wrong woman, and some good advice. Tony Montana says, "All I have in this world is my balls and my word, and I don't break them for nobody." Nevertheless, Al Pacino's anti-hero breaks both, just as he's poised to win the triple crown of money, women, and power. Did the big shot lose everything because he failed to listen to his boss's words of wisdom? Tony Montana's life was a crime-fueled rise from poverty to instantaneous wealth. He learned that to rise to the top, you had to step on a few toes and take what you want. Otherwise, you get fucked. Montana's boss, Frank Lopez, told him never underestimate the other guy's greed. Ironically, it was Tony's greed that led to Frank's death. "The world is yours." These words struck deep in the criminal aspirant. Scarface begins shortly after the 1980 mass immigration of Cubans from Mariel Harbor as a result of Cuba's economic collapse. As a refugee, Tony's belief in the American dream was anchored in crime. His pursuit of the dream started long before he envied the rich and powerful in Miami. To Tony, crime was the quickest way to money and power. And this seems to be his first mistake. In his application for asylum, Montana informs the immigration agents that he is a political prisoner. The agents press him for answers about his assassin's tattoo, but he claims to know nothing. They deny him a green card. Tony declares that there is nothing anyone can do to him that Cuba's dictator hasn't already done. Tony and his friend from Cuba, Manny Rivera, are willing to do anything to stay in America. That meant killing a man in exchange for the green card they were denied. It isn't long before Tony finds a way into the world of narcotics, courtesy of Omar Suarez, right-hand man to drug lord Frank Lopez. Soon Tony is taken into the fold. His new boss, Frank Lopez, warns his brazen apprentice that those who keep their head down are the ones who make it in the business. But Tony doesn't let anyone tell him what to do. As Tony's foothold in the Miami cartel grows deeper, his taste of the high life leaves him hungry for more. He allows for little distraction. This is one of Tony's many mistakes. On the personal front, Tony flaunts his wealth to the public, but remains increasingly unsatisfied. On the business front, Tony is drawn into Alejandro Sosa's network and agrees to supply cocaine from Bolivia without consulting the other drug lords. This brings him fast success, which in turn focuses the Fed's attention on him. Of the numerous mistakes Tony makes, it is the betrayal of Frank that seems to be the greatest reason for his downfall. Frank is the drug boss who first gambled on Tony. He allows Tony to advance in the organization. Frank has his own flaws as well, the worst of which is not seeing to it that his men take his advice. Ironically, he ignores his own advice. He miscalculates Tony's ambitious appetite. It never once crosses Frank's mind that Tony would bite the hand that feeds him. He grants Tony the Bolivia job. Tony travels with Omar Suarez, Frank's right-hand man, to meet with drug lord Alejandro Sosa. But even after the Bolivian cartel boss has Omar hanged from a helicopter, Frank still allows Tony to continue with business. Upon his return to Miami, an infuriated Frank views Tony with suspicion, not only because Omar's death, but also of Tony's growing autonomy. Tony starts establishing his own narcotics empire and is seen as a threat. And to make matters worse, Tony's interest in Frank's girl, Elvira, puts a strain on their relationship. Nothing good has ever come out of stealing the boss's girl, but to achieve his goals, Tony wants the right woman by his side. Tony sees Elvira as that, and as the ultimate trophy wife. And before long, he and Elvira are married. Conducting business with Sosa is a betrayal that finally leads Frank to put the contract out on Tony, through a dirty cop named Mel Bernstein. As for the relationship with Sosa, Tony swears never to betray him. However, he breaks his word to both these men, and as a result, they break his balls, so to speak, with Sosa succeeding where Frank had failed. Manny kills Frank for Tony, and as the dust settles in Frank's death, a new dust storm brews on the horizon. Tony's spiral into addiction goes into full gear. Tony complains that he has a junkie for a wife, and yet he most likely took his first whiff from her stash. When Tony complains that Elvira is damaged by his product and can't have children, Elvira leaves Tony, who by now is clearly deep in his addiction. She bitterly asks if he would even be alive if they had a child to raise, which should have made him consider that maybe he too was hooked on his own supply. Tony may have been on top of his game when his mind was clear, but as he falls deeper into his addiction, the drugs that once made him invincible are now making him an easy target. The one person Tony could have relied on during the attack by Sosa's goons was Manny, his best friend. What Tony does to Manny is unforgivable. They were brothers in many ways. Manny's loyalty went beyond simply being Tony's accomplice. Their friendship was rock solid early on in Freedom Town and downright unbreakable after the Miami Chainsaw Massacre. But because Manny is a womanizer and Tony's right-hand man in his drug business, Tony doesn't think Manny will ever be good enough for his sister Gina. It's a relationship he is unable to prevent, however. Upon seeing Gina at Manny's place, looking as though she had spent the night, Tony kills Manny, unaware that they had secretly just married. Al Pacino's protagonist in this cult classic fails miserably in his pursuit for the American dream. His failure was even more pronounced because of the heights of wealth and infamy from which he fell. His was a life as short-lived as his success, with a string of regrettable decisions and equally regrettable desires that caused him to lose everything: money, women, and power. In the end, Tony disregards the lesson of his narrative. His betrayals and his insatiable hunger led his downfall. Can you think of any other reason for Tony's downfall? We'd love to know what you think.